The biggest urban upzoning in Auckland's history just got the axe, and almost no one is talking about what happens next. The popular Dave Whitburn returns, property strategist, developer and investor who's been in the game for over 20 years, and he's made millions reading the market better than the politicians trying to control it. Stick around if you're wanting financial freedom faster.
Financial freedom faster. Financial freedom faster.
If you like making money rather than watching everyone else do it, hit that subscribe button and get ahead, because this is New Zealand's fastest growing real estate and investment show. Dave Whitburn was president of the Auckland Property Investor Association and continues expanding his 20 mil plus property portfolio. He started with a minor dwelling on the back of his section, and his latest development was 74 properties in West Auckland. Dave, what does this RMA policy U-turn mean?
This RMA policy U-turn is really interesting. The Cabinet has just cut the Chris Bishop's proposal from 540,000 new dwellings in Auckland down to around about 197,000. It's interesting. The whole point of these RMA reforms was to split the Resource Management Act as it is now, the features of it, into a Planning Act and a Natural and Environments Act. And that was to, I guess, streamline some of the concerns. So there are only technical issues there, so you can't really say no. Whereas the Natural Environments Act can be a little bit more invasive and look at some effects. But the whole purpose of it is to not tie people up. I've been tied up in Section 92, Resource Management Act 1991, request for further information, and many applicants and people listening to this will have been pretty stressed by it. The idea is to turn councils into cans, not can'ts. And that's a crucial thing to have, because if we have an attitude to say, yes, we can do it, then we can turn things around. It has been criticised by so many people that this is something that holds the country's economy back. And that's important. The economy means something. It means jobs. It means confidence, the ability to provide for yourself and your whānau or family. And it's just such a crucial thing to do it, to give the employers confidence to raise capital and to be able to provide jobs, spend that money on capital, to keep moving their business forward, to help generate taxes that keep our country motoring along. Realistically, we've been a little bit delayed and it's been frustrating, but I think this is a massive opportunity there. For us, it's a little bit like the legendary rowers Cohen and Sullivan in the 2012 London Olympics, where they're in 5th place at the 1500 metre mark. And boy, they turned things around, and hopefully the RMA reforms would be something like that, can just motivate them, inspire them to go for gold and do the unthinkable, to cut back some 2.5 seconds to getting that victory. And that's what I see. I have great hope for these changes, even with the cutbacks in Auckland.
The RMA is a bit of a political football. What the coalition government has to do is collaborate at a government level and then basically get rules to councils, and in this case Auckland Council, in a way that makes it easier for council to say yes rather than no.
Absolutely, Andrew. Right now we've got over 1,100 individualised planning zones, because we've got all sorts of councils, city councils, district councils, regional councils. So we've got so many zones there as well. It's just far too many. I'm not saying like we need to be like Japan, that have fewer than 20 zones across that entire country. However, the reality is I've got properties outside of Auckland as well, and you need a bit of a degree. You almost need to be a tax lawyer or a rocket scientist to work out what all the zones and all the planning rules mean. It's far too complicated and too convoluted. So it causes some issues. And then by having an effects-based system, so what are the effects? It gives some specialised interest groups a bit too much power and puts council under a bit of caution that, they might make a mistake. And they don't want to make mistakes. For some of them, it's the worst thing. It could mean them losing their job, which is their worst nightmare. So that's something there that's really important to understand the different perspectives in play. But the whole thing is about how to say yes, and this enables the yes culture rather than the no culture. I like it.
Just a reminder, this is the fastest growing investment and property channel in New Zealand. Why? Because the people who subscribe here are the ones making money while everyone else is still thinking about it. So hit that button before you get left in the dust. And it's all about getting a political alignment, infrastructure funding coming from that central level.
Absolutely, and that's something there that's really important to address, only because we do have a comparatively short political cycle of just 3 years. So if a government were to change, then it would be terrible if it were unwound. So that having that cross-party consensus is actually relatively important to doing this. So it's really important to make sure that from the national leading this charge, realise this is part of their coalition agreement with the ACT Party, need to work in with Labour and make sure that it's not too far-flung. And that's where some of the issues around iwi consulting have been raised by the Labour Party there. It's just a little bit of work on, I think, to make sure that the I guess the kaitiakitanga or sustainable management provisions are kept, and that's what I think will ensure longevity in this legislation to having the RMA reform split.
Yeah, and it sounds like Labor is trying to make that happen. So
Yes.
two birds with one stone. We're trying to stimulate the economy and trying to make us a growth economy whilst also providing housing. We've got a social dilemma ahead of us. We don't have enough homes.
Absolutely. However, we are seeing a little bit of an oversupply in new builds that previous commentators, such as the new head of property, Danny Paymes, addressed with Serena Yang, the general manager of the Auckland Property Investors Association, Barfoot and Thompson Chief Executive Peter Thompson, they're the largest property manager in Auckland, stated that there is a bit of an oversupply. So in Auckland, which has caused the worst rental market since 1991, in his opinion. So I will just challenge you a bit on that supply and the supply and demand drivers there. It's because some of the developers perhaps over leveraged and overexerted themselves in 2021, 2022. So they're not selling things. They don't want to realise a potentially over 20% loss or erosion in capital value. So they've become, I guess, accidental landlords and are renting out properties at the moment. So that's a feature that's in the market, and with some of the stock or inventory levels that we've seen in some of the chief economists that you've interviewed and I've talked to separately are concerned about, that we've still got a way through on some of the stock. So by having more supply opened up, that might not necessarily mean that that stock's going to sell. It might not necessarily mean that it's going to get financed or built, but it gives the ability to do it. And fortunately, it's not just for the next year or two. It's for the long term, we hope.
So back to the legal side of things.
Yes.
Are we looking at shifting power away from councils to central government?
There's a little bit of a shift towards doing that, because it's going to take some of the matters away in that Planning Act in particular. That's going to be focusing on few items of discretion. It's a technical consent, either you comply or not, more or less like a building consent. If you comply with the provisions of the New Zealand Building Code, without getting into any technical detail about acceptable solutions and verification methods and things like that, if I just keep it easy there for everybody to understand, that you either comply with the building code or you don't. And if you do, then you're going to get your consent. Whereas some of the subjective items there, which is more going to be with the natural environment side of things and the effects-based one, that's where there can still be a little bit of risk. And some of this is sensible. We had those terrible floods in early 2023, the Auckland Anniversary Weekend floods, Cyclone Gabrielle, other areas of the country was affected than Auckland with the devastating effects of Cyclone Gabrielle. People lost their lives to it. It's awful. We do need to consider about this. We need to consider the likes of Christchurch, Aranui, Bexley, Avonhead, and the like. These areas probably shouldn't have been built on. The earthquakes prove that with the liquefaction zones there. It was just absolutely awful. I'd seen houses with the builder colleague there on a 15-degree pitch on it there. So some of these are very valid effects that we do need to take into account. So I believe that that by actually just limiting the factors, we can actually focus on some of these things rather than some nitpicking things that are there in terms of some of the conditions on traffic management, Mayor Wayne Brown's concerns about Cone City and things like that. So if we can just focus on the effects-based things, I think we're going to get a really good thing. And that's what the legal split is, by having two acts, a planning act for technical consents and then dealing with the effects of it for the natural environment. That'll be a bit more subjective, so it should be, and that's fair enough.
And that's why if National and Labour can really cooperate on this RMA reform, you're not going to have, for example, the Greens Party, who are extremely concerned about the environmental side of things.
Yes.
And they're conflicted because they want more houses to bring the prices down for everyone. Potentially, if you're going to the outside fringe parties, this RMA reform is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the worldview from the Green Party as well, of course. But I believe its mainstream kaitiakitanga is really important there as well. I do understand their perspectives and what Julianne Gentis has been talking about. Te ao, the world being a taonga tuku iho, a treasure handed down. The mana whenua, mana moana rights, the land and the waters, that they are important to do. They are actually still dealt with in these RMA reforms. It's not treading carte blanche on it. We're not saying that we're leaking diesel into streams and just building great swathes of overland resorts with the overwater bungalows, Seychelles style, over beaches. That's not the case at all. So the broad brush approach between National and Labour, I think there's some really good consensus there. I understand that New Zealand First have it, and I think ACT do as well. There's of course a natural conflict sometimes between the economy and the environment, but I believe that this Act is really sensible and balances those conflicts well. There's still some room and some scope to hold back on some of the devastating environmental effects that could occur. This is good legislation.
RMA reform's good for progress for New Zealand, and Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown seems to be happy about what's going on. He's going to have a few complaints, but
yeah, I guess that's that Plan Change 78. That's the concern is about the government's medium density residential standards. That's I guess puts pay to things like the single housing zone, which is a zone for a house with 600 square metres and 2 stories high and reduced site coverage. Again, not trying to bore the readers with lots of technical detail and the viewers. What it does do is allow you to build 3-story houses, have multi-unit dwellings such as terraced houses and even apartments on them, and it gets rid of those zones that we've got. So he's potentially not quite so happy about that. A lot of work was put in for that reason. However, I think that it's for the greater good to have the entire country aligned and to have far fewer planning zones, and to divide divide New Zealand up into Tier 1 cities, Tier 2 cities and other areas. I think that's really sensible. It's just unworkable having 1,175 different zones in a country as small as New Zealand.
Dave, if these RMA changes come in, when is it likely to impact us as investors?
Yeah, there's a bit of a legislative process to put through. It has to get drafted as well, so that's a lot of work there for the Crown Law Office to do this. Then it'll go and have its first reading through Parliament, go through the Select Committee process where we're all able to make submissions on that, and I think it'll be quite popular and a heavily submitted item. Then it'll go through, have second, third readings and get the royal assent. That's going to take longer than this year to get enacted, in my opinion. I don't think that there's a willingness to try to rush or fast track this legislation through, because trying to build consensus so it doesn't get unwound. And I think that's what Labour did previously with the 1991 Resource Management Act, and that's why the Bolger government that was elected soon after that was enacted didn't overturn it straight away. It's just that it unfortunately has morphed away from what both Labour, when they envisaged it, and National, when they supported it and chose not to overturn it, has come through. So this way, I believe that it'll be in action next year.
All right. Well, it is fascinating stuff. And when you get into the details, if anyone's got any questions, leave them below, and we'll see if we can get Dave to answer them. Just a reminder, your competition has already subscribed to the fastest growing property and investment channel in New Zealand. That means they're getting the insights first, making the moves first, and locking in profits while you're still debating whether to click a button. Be smart and subscribe.
Less debt, more cash, passive income coming fast. Make your money work for you. Live the dream, it's overdue. So don't just wait, take control. Mortgage HQ will make you bold. Financial